game itself in Paris, I think they were lucky to escape with just a 2-0 defeat last night. They were second best. It wasn't a performance, I don't think, that made you think that there's a stirring comeback to come in a week's time.
They contained them to a point, but you're right, they were really wasteful, PSG, and Liverpool didn't create anything, and it shows you just how far they've fallen. And again, the Mo Salah situation has reared its head. He was sat shaking his head in disgust as 4 subs came on at one time, and he wasn't one of them.
This is a PSG side that are getting to be as good as they were this time last season, and the only positive to come out of it is that Liverpool aren't completely out of this tie.
This is a team that isn't performing. They've kept 1 clean sheet in 9 matches. The defence looks all over the place. They've just adapted to a back 3 for the first time. That made them toothless in attack.
I just thought you looked at the Liverpool team in Paris, and it wasn't one that struck fear into you. So there is so much wrong with Liverpool at this moment in time.
Konate, very lucky not to give away a penalty late in the game. Really, really fortunate. You don't tackle like that inside the penalty area in the Champions League. Welcome back to Premier League All Access. Scott Minto is here, so is Alex Crook. It's been 3 weeks since the Premier League went on hiatus. In that time, I've become so desperate for a VAR decision that I spent 20 minutes yesterday going through the Ring doorbell camera to see if the delivery driver's shoulder was in an offside position when he dropped off the pizza. It was very tight. I could have done with semi-automated offside technology. Scotty, we have missed the Premier League. It's back this weekend, though.
Yeah, look, you missed out West Ham as well on my CV, but that's fine. That's okay. And
I thought you wanted to just sweep that under the carpet right now.
No, not at all. Not at all. Proud to have played for them. Yeah, we didn't learn too much out of England apart from what's not great, but I never want to have a go at the international breaks. And then, of course, there's the FA Cup. But yeah, the Premier League is a monster, isn't it? And there's so many stories this weekend. Really looking forward to it.
Champions League is a bit of a monster too, Crook. And we'll talk in detail about Arne Slot and Liverpool in the future in just a second. But the game itself in Paris, I think they were lucky to escape with just a 2-0 defeat, weren't they? I mean, if Hakimi, Dembele, Kvaratskhelia, Doué had actually really been on it and finished their chances, they could have ended the tie last night. They were second best. It wasn't a performance, I don't think, that made you think that there's a stirring comeback to come in a week's time.
No, obviously the ex-Liverpool players on the panel, Steven Gerrard and Steve McManaman, were talking about what can happen under the lights at Anfield, and there is a history of Liverpool defying the odds when you least expect them to. But you're right, I watched the game with my eldest boy last night. We didn't see much to suggest there was anything other than a fairly routine PSG victory to come on Merseyside next week. They contained them to a point, but you're right, they were really wasteful, PSG, and Liverpool didn't create anything, and it shows you just how far they've fallen. And again, the Mo Salah situation has reared its head. He was sat shaking his head in disgust as 4 subs came on at one time, and he wasn't one of them. So I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about that in the coming days as well.
Yeah, listen, anything can happen in the second leg of a Champions League tie. We know that from previous history, and Liverpool have certainly got previous history of that. You mentioned Mo Salah there, unused sub in a game of that magnitude. How the mighty have fallen, Scott Minto. Might be something he has to get used to between now and the end of the season. There was that moment when he walked up behind Stevie G and Maka and Laura, and it was almost going to have a chat and then decided against having a chat and didn't quite want to commit to it. But you get the feeling that he's going to have something to say at some point, although I think there's a bit of a deal between the two that if he wants to leave for a free in the summer, then he might not be able to say too much, Scott.
Is that right? There's an NDA, is there? Almost.
Well, I listen, I don't know, but I would have expected so, wouldn't you?
He'll play at the weekend, I think. But look, in terms of being an unused sub when so many subs came on, yeah, you can certainly question that. Although Arne Slot said in his post-match presser that, this is not a game where we're going to score goals. I mean, he didn't even have a shot on target in the whole 90 minutes. This was about just trying to keep it to 2-0. But we can't really have double standards with him not starting, especially with that system when so many people have been saying that he's a million miles from where he used to be. So this is a PSG side that are getting to be as good as they were this time last season. And the only positive to come out of it is that Liverpool aren't completely out of this tie, but I'm with Crookie. Now, let's not forget as well that the French League have done them a real favour. Crucial game against Lens and have just cancelled that one. So they've got a whole week to prepare. Liverpool have that massive game against Fulham that they quite simply have to win. I can see PSG going to Anfield and winning the game outright.
We're going to preview that game against Fulham in just a tick. So we'll keep the powder dry on the rest of the Liverpool chat because there's quite a lot to come and unpick. Arsenal left it late against Sporting, although they looked to me as if they'd sort of gone back to being Arsenal again, which is 1-0 to the Arsenal, getting results done. They actually had some great opportunities in the match before they scored. Bayern and Kane having the upper hand against Madrid in a terrific game in the Bernabeu. I was there on Tuesday night. Wow, what a performance that was from Bayern Munich. And they look the real deal, actually. I think if you're going to pick a winner, I think it comes from that side of the draw, doesn't it, Crook?
Well, listen, I wouldn't write off Arsenal with their defensive stability. I know Scott was really impressed with their performance at Sporting against a team who don't lose at home very often. So they're going to get through that tie over 2 legs and all of a sudden they're semi-finalists again. They'll have learnt from the experience of last year. But I did that game as well. First and foremost, an absolute rip-roarer, 40 shots between them. Manuel Neuer actually made some big saves in the first half, even though Bayern were on top. Real Madrid on the counter-attack were dangerous. But I did come away thinking, as you do, I think Bayern could go all the way here. You know, I just think they've got so much quality. Harry Kane, if he can stay fit and sharp, is going to be a real menace. And is it written in the stars that the serial loser at Tottenham denies Arsenal the European Cup?
I don't know. We'll find out. I thought Elise was absolutely terrific in the match. He was brilliant. And he was a little bit unlucky not to be rewarded with a goal for his performance. Big shock as Atletico Madrid beat Barcelona. The Alvarez free kick is an absolute postage stamp perler, isn't it? And by the way, the winner of that leg plays Arsenal in the next round of the competition. And it's a little bit emotional there at the moment. I don't know if you saw the press conference with Antoine Semenyo and Diego Simeone the day before. I thought it was quite poignant the way that Simeone took control of that press conference to pay tribute to Griezmann, who's obviously going to leave at the end of the season. He was sort of like counting down the rest of the games that he's got. He said, "You just keep giving everything for us," almost giving him a personal team talk in front of everybody, bigging him up, making him feel brilliant. And I think that maybe just tipped the balance yesterday in terms of managing emotions properly in the camp now. Fascinating.
It's interesting you say that, Sam, when we've just been talking and we will be talking about the Slot-Salah relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, it is quite fascinating. And it was what I thought was the quote that I loved was when he turned around to him and said, "Thank you for always respecting the player-friend relationship that we have." And then he turned around to him and, "I see you as a player first and a friend second, but I love you." And it was a really wonderful piece of sort of like commanding the press conference that only Simeone can do. Right, that's it for the Champions League. Time to look ahead to the long-awaited return of the Premier League, starting with a title race and a big clash at Stamford Bridge. Crookmeister, City 9 behind Arsenal with a game in hand. We will be there on Sunday afternoon. In fact, I'm doing both Arsenal and City this weekend, so we'll get a good look at whoever it is who's going to be champions this season. The good news for Pep Guardiola is Chelsea never beat them. Chelsea haven't beaten them since the Champions League final in 2021. They're coming off the back of a really impressive performance in the Carabao Cup against Arsenal and the best win of the season against Liverpool in the FA Cup. So are Chelsea in trouble here?
Well, they're due one on the law of averages, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to see past City if they play as well as they did in that FA Cup quarter-final against Liverpool. I guess you have to caveat that and say we've said a few times this season, City are back. We said it in the Club World Cup, and then they got dumped out by a team from Saudi Arabia. So they're not yet fully consistent and fully reliable, and it is a tough game away from home. Chelsea have got it all to play for themselves in terms of the Champions League. But yeah, I do fancy City, and I wonder if we're going to be talking about the absence of Enzo Fernandez, the self-inflicted wound, if you like, that Chelsea have in thrust on themselves with this 2-game suspension. Personally, I think just suspending him for 1 game against Port Vale would have sent out a message. I don't really think they needed to force themselves to be without him for this match, but the decision has been made. And obviously City is scenting blood now, aren't they, with Arsenal losing those 2 cup games, so they're going to try and keep the pressure on as best they can. Again, maybe the outcome might depend on what happens 24 hours earlier at the Emirates, and if Arsenal win that game, then it's another step closer to the title for them, and a blow for City.
Okay, we'll circle back to City in just a second then, but you did raise the Enzo Fernandez thing. And it is through choice that they're not going to have him for this Manchester City game. I thought for Port Vale, fine, no problem. You know you can negotiate that. But did he have to send a message to Enzo Fernandez that I'm going to leave you out of a big game in order for it to make an impact? Or is that cutting off your nose to spite your face, Scott?
Well, when you say he, I texted quickly when the news came on. I think you were on air at the time with Gabby, maybe, Crookie. And I texted him, I said, I think this is the hierarchy. This isn't Liam. And then listening to the way he speaks, I spoke about it. It was always we, and I'm part of a decision maker. And so for me, it wasn't him. I don't agree with it. And I don't even agree with a one match ban because, you know, the one match ban doesn't mean anything against the worst team in League One. So it's almost just go with the old school 2 weeks wages. That may or may not hurt him at all. People turn around and say they're on enough money, but no one wants to, whatever you're on, no one wants to be docked 2 weeks wages, which is the maximum you could do back in the day. And you are cutting your nose off to spite your face. Chelsea need to be finishing 5th at worst. So you need your best players. And you can certainly say, well, it could be covered because obviously if Lavia's fit and hopefully he will be, then you could just bring Caicedo back in. But the bottom line is you want Enzo Fernandez fit and available, even if it's to come off the bench, even if you're not going to start him. So I'm personally, I'm not in agreement with it. And I don't think it was him. I think it was the hierarchy.
Well, the one thing there you said that raises alarm bells immediately for me is if Lavia is fit, which is unlikely to ever happen on a consistent basis. And that's no disrespect to Romeo Lavia, because I know for a fact that he works incredibly hard to get himself fit, but he can't stay fit. And the rigours of the Premier League is very difficult for his body to cope with. But putting that to one side, you know, I think this maybe sort of underscores a little bit of naivety in terms of the management structure at Chelsea. And I'm not just talking about Liam, I'm talking about the other people above him who obviously have never been in a situation like this before, but I'm afraid are going to find themselves, as we predicted beforehand on the podcast, in the situation in the future a lot more often, because players will get frustrated if you're not challenging for big prizes. If you haven't got the capability to be able to try and win anything, then the big players that you have signed and developed, the superstars that you wanted to be able to grow into those experienced players, will desert you because they're not going to sit around waiting for you to produce a team that can compete. So I think in the old days, what would have happened here, if you had an old school manager, they would have put their arm around Enzo Fernandez and they would have said, give me one more year, or give me to the end of the season. Don't worry about what they're all saying about you. I know they're giving you crap. We might have to fine you internally, but don't worry. I'll sort you out. You'll be in my team. Try and bring him on board as a senior player to lead the team until at least the end of the season. At the end of the season, deal with it then. But as Scott says, Crook, they have got to finish in the Champions League places. They need Enzo Fernandez. He is their most creative player. If you look at the statistics over the last 2 years, no one's got more goals and involvements, assists and goals over the last 2 years than Enzo Fernandez. He creates more chances. Palmer hasn't been at his best this season. They haven't got a regular goal scorer of note apart from João Pedro, and he goes in fits and starts. They need him in the team, especially against Manchester City.
Yeah, and also he's one of the few leaders they've got. You know, it's a very inexperienced squad, as we've spoken about week in, week out over the course of the season. He is someone who does step up and show those leadership qualities. I think he brings the best out of Moises Caicedo as well. There's an awful lot of pressure on Caicedo in this game. I think I'm right in saying if he gets a yellow card, he triggers a 2-match suspension. So I wonder if he's going to have to play a little bit within himself, particularly without Fernandez alongside him. So you're right, the more we talk about this game, the more I'm coming around to a Manchester City victory. And I do wonder if Chelsea might rue that decision come the end of the season. It does look like at the moment, in terms of finishing 5th and getting that last Champions League spot that we should mention we now know is confirmed because of Arsenal's victory in Lisbon. There will be 5 Champions League places. I don't think it comes down to who's better out of Chelsea or Liverpool. It might come down to who's worse between now and the end of the season, or who's less worse.
If that's a phrase, yes. Haaland back with a bang. He's really started to perform again. If he finishes the season, Scott, how he started it, can he be the catalyst for Manchester City to close the gap and make it interesting?
Well, he has to, really, doesn't he? I mean, if City are to really put pressure on Arsenal, look, I don't think this is actually going to be as easy for City as many people think. Because I know Chelsea have got a bad record. We've just spoken about Enzo Fernandez, but Chelsea, on their day, are capable of putting in a really good performance. I was at Port Vale last week, and obviously, I'm not going to say too much about Port Vale, but I thought Esteval just being back was a big plus. So if you look at that front four that they've got, Joao Pedro, Neto, Palmer, and Esteval, that can hurt any team in the Premier League and in Europe. The question is, how many goals will they concede against the City side? But in terms of Haaland, if they are to win or really sort of breathe down the necks of Arsenal, these next two games are absolutely pivotal, aren't they? Where everyone's sort of saying Bournemouth, well, Arsenal should go past them, and it was a great result and a really good away performance in Lisbon by Arsenal. So then City have to win at Stamford Bridge, and if they do win, then they quite simply again have to win next week, the following week against Arsenal. So this is a game that City need to win, and I do think they will, with the likes of Haaland, Semenyo, Cherki, and Doku as well.
City big favourites for the FA Cup now. They've already got the Carabao Cup in the bag. Do you think, there's lots of rumours about it, and I spoke to a few ex-Manchester City players this week about just this subject matter. Do you think that would be a satisfactory haul for Pep Guardiola to wave goodbye with? Or do you think that he might be double thinking again and thinking about seeing out that final year of his contract? What's the latest, Crook?
Well, the latest is that there is no latest. I think we reported during the international break that Manchester City were seeking clarity on the back of that Wembley win over Arsenal as to what Guardiola is looking to do. The mere fact the hierarchy are asking that question tells you there is a real doubt about if Guardiola continues beyond the end of the season. If he goes, I think it's pretty much a tap-in that Enzo Maresca will be the heir to the throne. I think Vincent Kompany may have been the number one choice, but he's shrewd enough to wait and be the successor to the successor, if you like. And obviously he's doing very well at Bayern Munich. So if I was a betting man speaking to people close to the football club, journalists who cover the club on a regular basis, I'd say 60% Guardiola leaves at the end of the season. But it just shows there's no perfect timing, doesn't it? It's very difficult for a manager to pick his moments. Sir Alex Ferguson did it. I think he'd gone the year earlier, but for that Aguero goal against Queen's Park Rangers, he stayed one more year. He paid big money for Robin van Persie, knowing it wasn't really a signing for the future because he wanted to bow out with the Premier League title. But you look at Arsene Wenger, it was so toxic by the end of his tenure. The great Brian Clough went out on the back of a relegation. So very few managers get to pick the perfect moment. I think if he goes away with a double Pep Guardiola, that might be enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe if he wins the title and comes from nowhere to pip Arsenal to it, then I think that might be the perfect way of signing off, especially if he's already won the League Cup and then has a chance to win a double with the FA Cup as well. That would be quite some impressive feat, bearing in mind where they were at the beginning of the season. But listen, the increasing chatter is that he may well move on at the end of the campaign. It will be incredible, won't it, if Liam Rosenior does pull off a positive result here, Scott? You seem to be a little bit more positive than the rest of us about Chelsea's prospects here. So if you were going to give us a tactical masterclass as to how he does it, how would you suggest that they set up?
Yeah, Minto against Guardiola. There's only one winner there, isn't there?
Well, you've studied him more closely than most.
Well, should we say I'm less negative rather than more positive than most people? Look, I do think, and Chelsea have shown on many occasions this season, that on one-off games they are capable of really hurting teams. And the Stamford Bridge faithful, they're desperate to try and get behind the team. So if they can start well on the front foot and somehow, look, City have to have an off day. They're the better team. I think they've got the better players. But I do think if Lavia is fit and Moises Caicedo comes back in, that they're really good in terms of controlling the tempo of the game. So it won't be all about Manchester City. And it might be that Chelsea try and play on the counter-attack, despite them being at home, with the likes of Cole Palmer, Esteval, Neto, and Joao Pedro is turning into be one of the stars of the Premier League right now. Just moments. They can have just moments. And you look at City and look, whatever you say, the last two games, maybe this is the moment now they're going to crack on and win every game from here on into the end of the season. But all's what we've seen so far this season is doing really well, dropping points where they don't expect it, whether that's switching off, whether that's lack of concentration. And I still feel defensively, I'm hoping defensively they can be got at. But yeah, the last couple of games, I think they've been absolutely superb. I like Kusanov. I like Gerhi. O'Reilly can sometimes be hit and miss. Same with Nunes as well. So down the flanks, can they get in behind there? But I'm struggling to really convince anyone, including myself, that Chelsea will get a win here.
Arsenal against Bournemouth, Saturday lunchtime, live on talkSPORT. It kicks off at 12:30. Massive game for Arsenal. After back-to-back defeats in the cup competitions, they've managed to get a victory in the Champions League. Scott Minto did that. We'll get his view on their overall performance very shortly. But do you think that win in midweek just was timely in a way, Alex, because it sort of quietened some of the critics, didn't it?
Yeah, certainly silences some of the noise around them. I think when the draw came out, we were on air on that Friday and we all felt, myself, you and Gabby, that actually Arsenal have got a direct route to the final. Never quite pans out that way, and the Sporting game became more difficult just because they'd lost a Wembley Cup final and then been dumped out the FA Cup by Southampton. But I thought it was a really professional job from Arsenal. Defensively, they were rock solid. I thought actually it was a very mature European away performance and the perfect tonic, if you like, to what had happened in the previous couple of matches. And again, just because they've got that victory on the board, I think it makes the prospect of the visit of Bournemouth less daunting. We were all getting overexcited, weren't we, after they lost to Southampton, saying, well, it could unravel. Imagine they lose in Lisbon. Then they've got Bournemouth. That's a tough game. But actually, you look at Arsenal's home record, this is a game they are heavy favourites to win.
When you say we were all, I was definitely off this weekend, so it wasn't me saying that. I think you're just saying you, aren't you? Really? Let's be honest.
The royal
we could see the headlines, couldn't we, of the total Arsenal collapse.
You were writing them. That's why you could see them. Scott, what did you think of their performance?
I thought it was an excellent away performance. And it was interesting how the Arsenal haters were sort of saying, oh, they're so boring, they're so boring. For me, that was the classic, brilliant European away performance where they were really, really solid. I mentioned to Crookie and Henry on the last pod that I feel that when Zubimendi and Declan Rice aren't in that midfield, they lose a bit. They certainly lost a bit against Southampton, not just in terms of starting attacks, but definitely in terms of protecting the back four. I think when Gabriel and Saliba are playing together, they're a different, animal in terms of a defensive point of view. And actually, 0-0 still would have been a really commanding performance. I would have fancied them strongly. Sporting had won their previous 17 games at home. They won every single game in the Champions League, including beating PSG. So for them to even if they hadn't have won it, the way they bossed it, I thought was a brilliant answer to what had happened in previous weeks of getting knocked out of, obviously back-to-back defeats, though meaning two competitions they're out of it. Really good performance. They will get to the semi-finals, and the confidence psychologically going forward, especially as Crookie says for this Bournemouth game, I fancy them strongly here.
Interesting you mentioned Zubimendi and Rice. I think the criticism of those two players has been, especially over recent matches, is that they've been a little bit too safe with the passing, not taking a risk with the ball, not trying to force it. I think the Lisbon game demanded that they were a little bit safer and more careful with their possession. Whereas I think when it comes to playing at home against a Bournemouth team that will try and hit you on the counter-attack, safety first is okay, but you've got to hurt them because they've got a threat. They've got weapons. They're not the most prolific team in the world, Bournemouth, but they do and can score goals when everybody is on form. But I worry a little bit about this match for Arsenal, mainly because of the amount of time that Bournemouth have had off, which means they've been on the training ground with Andoni Iraola for a very long time, which usually equals good performance upcoming. What has happened to Martin Ødegaard this season? Injuries has certainly been an issue, Crook, but Johnny Cochran, who's a big Arsenal YouTuber and social media man for this podcast, was on the breakfast show earlier in the week, or the weekend breakfast show earlier in the week, and he was talking about the possibility that maybe manager and captain weren't quite in tune. What do you think he means by that, and what do you think's happening there?
I think he probably just means that Ødegaard has had an underwhelming season. One goal, not that many assists. Obviously, he's been ravaged by injury. I don't see an issue between player and manager, to be honest. I do think there's a question mark now. If you're picking your best 11, if Ødegaard is in it, that's partly due to the sensational form that Max Dowman has shown, the fact you've got the versatility of Kai Havertz to play in the the number 10 position.
Well,
But
that is a problem in itself, isn't it? If the captain is not getting into the starting 11.
yeah, but I don't know if that's a personality issue between Arteta and Ødegaard.
No.
As I say, more the fact that he's just not hitting the
performing.
heights that he was in previous seasons. Again, to me, he looks like a player who's been overplayed, and maybe that's why he's starting to pick up these niggly injuries along the way. But yeah, I definitely think there's a debate to be had about whether Ødegaard is what they need. I think if you're asking against Bournemouth, maybe you could afford to take him out. But if you go to Manchester City, I think you probably need your captain there, and you need his experience for that big game at the Etihad.
Good moment for Kai Havertz in midweek, getting the winning goal. No one knows what his best position is. Every week, Jeremy, our producer, writes on the running order, what is his best position? No one knows. No one's ever known, right? Go back to Leverkusen, go back even before that. No one knows. Go back to Germany days. They played him at left back on a couple of occasions because they just don't know where his best position is. I don't think he knows where his best position is, but he is an incredible footballer, and getting him in the team is really important. And I think when you watch him and you see the way he moves, the cultured passes that he can come up with to unlock defences, the little touches here and there, he's a beautiful player to watch. As far as the opponents go, how does a fully rested Bournemouth side, who last played on the 20th of March, go about attacking this Arsenal team, Crookie? Because having won each of their first 8 home games against the Cherries in all competitions, Arsenal actually lost this fixture last season 2-1. And it's an early kickoff too.
Yeah, and it's a good point you make, actually, just about, the way that Andoni Iraola likes to play football, that high press, the high tempo nature of Bournemouth's game probably will be suited by the fact they've had plenty of time on the training ground to prepare for this, whereas Arsenal's obviously had a congested period. So that does give them a chance, Bournemouth. And you look at their recent record, I don't think they're going to seriously threaten the European places because they don't win enough games, but they don't lose many, do they? They're a difficult team to roll over. So I think this is going to be a game of patience. And again, what's intriguing is obviously this is the first time Arsenal have played at home since they lost those 2 cup games. Yes, they've gone away to Lisbon. The travelling fans were terrific, as they always are. But there might be a little bit of nervousness amongst the home supporters on the back of those cup defeats that maybe Bournemouth can exploit.
Okay, let's move away from the title race and into the race for the European places. There are 5 Champions League places up for grabs in the Premier League. We now know this. We told you it was always going to be the case, but we now know for a fact that that is going to be the case. So let's start at Anfield. Let's go to Anfield, where Fulham are the visitors this weekend. Beleaguered Liverpool really do need a result. They're stuck in a bit of a rut. They were well and truly second best in their last 2 games, actually. And they're looking as if they're running out of ideas a little bit. No Mo Salah in midweek, didn't come off the bench. They're winless in their last 3 Premier League games against Fulham. Stevie G mentioned this week, Scott, on talkSPORT on the breakfast show when he came on with the boys, that this Fulham game is probably more important than the PSG ones. Is he right about that?
I think probably what he meant was Liverpool have to be in the Champions League next season. And let's be fair, we said even before the PSG game, they ain't going to get past PSG. And I think they could, again, lose both those ties. So this game in itself and the rest of the games here on in are absolutely massive. We're expecting Man City to beat Chelsea. Well, Liverpool have to win this game, but this will not be easy because we talked about there's a lot of teams who have had a lot of time on the training pitch. Well, Fulham are one of those. So Marcus Silva's a very good coach as well, just like Andoni Iraola. So I would imagine Fulham would be really fresh, really buzzing for this up against the Liverpool side that, psychologically are in a really bad place right now. And boy, do they need the fans behind them now. I know there's a really growing feeling, and I was really interested to hear Danny Murphy saying the White and Jordan show that if they lost the game in Paris badly, that Arne Slot would go. I mean, for him to say that, he's got a feeling of what's going on Merseyside. So the fans are clearly not having Arne Slot, which seems like a real shame. And it just feels like we talk about post-Fergie. It's almost like there should be a sort of like a phrase in the Oxford Dictionary to say post-Fergie, a job you never take, or to follow Fergie. And the Wenger's the same as well. And I think winning the Premier League title, he almost had to do that, but all it did was delay there's the complete different change of tactics, different way of playing. And Jurgen Klopp, what he did on the pitch as well as off the pitch, was just so iconic that I think anyone following was always going to struggle, or almost had to win major trophies. And this is that second season now where it does look like Arne Slot will not be in charge, because I don't know what's going to happen between Chelsea and Liverpool. But what I do know is, yeah, Stevie G is right in that sense that they have to finish in the Champions League place, so they have to win this game.
Yeah, I think what he meant is that it's the future of the club and probably the future of Slot depends on whether or not they finish in the Champions League places. Fascinating. You mentioned the following on from Klopp's situation. His personality was so all encompassing. He was the personality at the football club when he was the manager. Whereas I think with Arne Slot, he's almost sort of just dampened down the main character energy and just allowed the players to take a little bit more of the spotlight. But in doing that, maybe he's just given a little bit too much power to them as well. There is a caveat here, isn't there? There's always the Jota situation. You never know how much impact that is going to have had, Crook. But there is a lot being talked about the Anfield atmosphere, about the fans not having Arne Slot. We mentioned it on this podcast not so long ago that we woke up on a Sunday morning and there were still tickets available to go to Anfield, which literally blew everybody away because we couldn't believe that was happening. There is a bit of frustration with the manager who says his team are in survival mode. They certainly were the other night. They needed to be. But this is a team that isn't performing. They've kept one clean sheet in 9 matches. The defence looks all over the place. They've just adapted to a back three for the first time. That made them toothless in attack. They've been beaten by Wolves. Tottenham managed to grab something from them when they were at their lowest ebb. Is this a team that are emotionally exhausted, a team that are not fighting for the manager, or a team that are being tactically outwitted too often?
I mean, I think we could do a whole podcast on the decline of Liverpool, to be honest. But the short answer is I think it's probably a combination of all three. You mentioned it already. Don't underestimate the emotional toll that losing such a popular teammate in such horrendous circumstances took in the summer. A lot of the new signings have not worked out. Obviously, Isak got off the bench last night, but for a British record fee, he is yet to deliver. I thought Florian Wirtz again looked good in patches, but still his teammates don't seem to be quite on the same wavelength. I just thought you looked at the Liverpool team in Paris and it wasn't one that struck fear into you. You know, had a backup goalkeeper who's clearly not as good as Alisson, although he had a decent night. I thought Mamardashvili, you can't label any responsibility at his door. Frimpong, not as good as Trent Alexander-Arnold. Kirkez, at the moment, doesn't look like an upgrade on Andy Robertson. The players going forward aren't really firing. Ekitige's done all right to a point, but it's an awful lot of pressure on his shoulders. The midfield is not functioning like it was last year. Gravenberch, in particular, looks a year older. And obviously Salah, who carried them to that title last season, is on the bench because his form doesn't warrant a place in the starting lineup. So there is so much wrong with Liverpool at this moment in time. And actually, there's so much wrong with Liverpool. I fancy Fulham. 1 defeat in 5, challenging for a European place themselves. Anfield isn't the fortress that it once was. I think the crowd could turn very quickly. If Fulham win here, I would not be surprised.
Yeah, well, listen, I wouldn't be surprised either. Their recent record against Liverpool is absolutely sensational, really, in comparison to other teams and their records against Liverpool. They're well rested. As you mentioned, they're in the mix for European football. The Cottagers have scored 13 goals in 7 Premier League games against Liverpool since their return to the Premier League in 2022. Only Spurs and Brighton have netted more against the Reds in that time. I'm not saying they've got their number, but it feels as if Marco Silva has a real sort of handle on how to attack this Liverpool team. I think he's a brilliant manager, brilliant character, and I'll be very surprised, actually, if he's the Fulham manager next season. Just a quick word on that Liverpool defence. I thought Konate, very lucky not to give away a penalty late in the game. Really, really fortunate not to give away a penalty late in the game. He did well with his tackle that he got away with when the penalty was overturned when he came from behind. But if you tackle from that angle, you are asking for trouble, by the way. One slight slip. And I was a little bit surprised, actually, that it was overturned because there definitely was contact. It was dicey. Listen, we don't want penalties to be given for very small, minimal amounts of contact, but you don't tackle like that inside the penalty area in the Champions League. I mean, listen, he got it right, but it was dicey. Let's switch our focus now to Spurs. They've got a new man in the dugout. We probably should have said that they've got a new man in the dugout again. Do you know what? It was quite funny, actually, when I was thinking about what's happened over the course of the last 3 weeks. I was going to say, oh, we've gone 3 weeks without having too much drama at Spurs. Then I'd remembered, actually, they'd sacked a manager and changed one. But such is the normal nature of that now. It just feels par for the course. De Zerbi making his debut at the weekend. Scott, impossible to know what kind of thing to expect. I think he can't sort of go full De Zerbi, full throttle De Zerbi. He's going to have to sort of try and just make the best of what he's got, really, against a Sunderland team that have been pretty good recently.
Yeah, and I've said, look, to me, well, there is no long term with De Zerbi, so forget about that 5-year contract. But the medium term, I think, is a really good signing for Spurs. But for the short term, if he is going to go full on De Zerbi, I'm not sure he can dilute himself. I'm not sure there is a half measure for Roberto De Zerbi.
Well, exactly 2/3 of Tottenham Hotspur's points in the Premier League this season have come away from home. It might actually suit them to be on the road this weekend. I don't think he can make major changes to the lineup, can he? I mean, what do you do? Get Simons back in the side? Do you keep Romero in the side? I think he's the kind of fella, to me, that's going to make the most of Romero. I think those two will either get on like a house on fire or be major enemies. It's one of the two. There's going to be no in between.
Well, I think he's shrewd enough to know that Roberto De Zerbi needs the senior players on side. He did that really well, as you've mentioned a couple of times on this podcast at Brighton. So I'd imagine he's already made a beeline for Romero and Van der Ven, and he's probably being their best mate at the moment. See what happens in the summer if they do stay up. In terms of Xavi Simons, no-brainer for me to put him back in the team. I thought that was baffling from Igor Tudor that he dropped him for that Forest game after he was so good in the midweek match prior to it against Atletico Madrid. But I don't expect wholesale changes from De Zerbi. I think the only way he keeps this team up is if he abandons his principles because they take too long to get across the training pitch. They don't have time on their side and just finds a way really to grind results. This is a really difficult start. How many teams have gone to Sunderland and won in the Premier League this season? They themselves feel they've maybe got a shout of a European place, but certainly if they're motivated to finish above Newcastle, which would be a hell of a statement in their first year back in the Premier League. Then it's Brighton at home. Obviously a big emotional link there with De Zerbi, but Brighton have found some form as well. I think they're two really tricky games for De Zerbi. And if they lose at Sunderland, it's almost back to the drawing board, isn't it? They're going to be praying in that Tottenham boardroom. This new manager bounce works in a way that it never did under Tudor.
To be honest with you, I think Amazon have run out of stock of drawing boards because Tottenham have been ordering so many new ones. Sunderland, a bit of a tricky proposition, especially at home after a wobble at the beginning of the year. They've won actually 2 of their last 3 Premier League games. I think if you're going to try and formulate a game plan, though, to try and win this match, set pieces might be key for Tottenham here, because if you look at all the criticism that Arsenal have got, by the way, for being set-piece FC. Actually, set pieces have been more important to Tottenham this season than they have to any other team apart from Leeds United. Only Leeds United have scored a higher proportion of their Premier League goals this season from non-penalty set plays than Tottenham Hotspur. I wonder whether or not he will think about maximising those, because if you take that away from the game and go for the purest form of it, actually you're losing their best weapon, or what has been their best weapon this season. So I think maybe a more rudimentary approach might be on the cards here.
Yeah, and they've got the weapons, haven't they? You know, Van der Ven at one stage was their top scorer in all competitions. He may well still be. And obviously Romero is a threat from those set pieces as well. So yeah, don't be surprised to see De Zerbi go back to basics. I'm still absolutely fascinated by what I've called a sort of social experiment, because we know that De Zerbi is a very volatile character. He's someone who demands a lot of his paymasters. He'd fallen out with a few people at Brighton by the time he left. So how's he going to get on with his Tottenham board? That's probably a question for the longer term. But in the short term, how is he going to respond to a dressing room whose character, I think, is questionable? You know, we debated it on the show, didn't we, on Monday, about the father of Christian Romero leaking to everybody that he's got a release clause. That doesn't suggest you've got a captain there who is committed to the cause. I wonder how that would have gone now.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And do you know what? You keep talking about hate a relationship with the board and the paymasters. I kind of think that they've kind of just gone, you're in charge now, Roberto. Here's the keys, get on with it. And they're just going to stand off him. It feels like that to me. I think they're just going to, every now and again, meet up. He's going to give them a list of things to do. And they're just going to have to go away and do it. They've almost made a pact with him. He is just in charge now. That's it. That's the only way they could get him through the door. So fair enough. That's what they needed at that time. They were desperate. They would give away the crown jewels in order to get him in the door. They seem to have done that. So I think we're now going to see just how good Roberto De Zerbi is, because he has got a football club all of his own to play with.
And by the way, there is an argument to be made that maybe he's not as good as he thinks he is. When you look how it unravelled at Brighton, and yes, there were some question marks about Fabian Herzler, but they're up there again challenging for Europe. Marseille, it all seemed to implode very quickly as well. So I think he's got a little bit of proving himself to do in this job as well. Bearing in mind that Manchester United didn't want him.
He's definitely got no excuses now, right? Okay, so basically here's the keys to the castle, go and defend it. So let's just see what happens now. We'll go and build it up, which is why I suppose what really is the job. Some quick hits just quickly before we go. Manchester United Leeds is the Monday Night Football. We will be there, very much looking forward to that. Manchester United unbeaten in their last 18 home league games against the Leeds United side since a 1-0 loss in February 1981, Crook. Dave Sexton was in charge back then, so what are we expecting at the Theatre of Dreams?
Yeah, they've beaten us in the FA Cup since then, with that Jermaine Beckford goal at the Stretford end. But you're right, historically, this is a fixture that tends to bring the best out of Manchester United. I remember that opening day of the season a few years ago when Leeds had just come up. They were riding the crest of the wave. They got absolutely battered by Bruno Fernandez in particular. Welcome back to the big time, boys. I was there a couple of years ago when it finished in a 2-2 draw. I think United are in a better place, Manchester United, than they were then. But my concern is opposite of what you were saying about Bournemouth, really. 3 weeks with no game for United. How sharp are they going to be? I know they had this training camp in Dublin this week, promoting actually a pre-season friendly with Leeds at Croke Park. That was the main reason they were there. So I hope that has tuned them up and got some life in the legs and just got them fired up, because it's a big period for United. We think they're in a brilliant position to qualify for the Champions League because of the job that Michael Carrick has done, and they are. But they got some tricky fixtures, They've still got to go to Stamford Bridge on a Saturday night live on talkSPORT. They've still got Liverpool at home. They've not been to Sunderland yet either. And then they go to Brighton on the final day. So they can't afford to rest on their laurels here, United, and think the job is half done. They still need to put those wins on the board.
Do you think Michael Carrick is going to allow them to rest on their laurels? Because I don't. Manchester United have lost just one of their last 14 Premier League games since Christmas Day. The only team to have a better record than Manchester United since Christmas Day are Arsenal. It does beg the question, doesn't it? If they'd started just a little bit better, where would they be? Leeds United have failed to score in each of their last 4 Premier League games, so maybe their defence won't be as tested as much as maybe they have been previously. Forest against Villa is an interesting game, I thought, on Sunday, mainly because Villa are still trying to cement their place in the Champions League arena for next season, and Nottingham Forest trying to keep pulling away from that relegation zone. Obviously, the win over Tottenham has helped them do that, but they are winless in 7 home league games, Crook.
Yeah, and both obviously have away trips in Europe on Thursday night, which is going to play into it as well. Obviously, we're recording this on Thursday morning. I think Villa probably will go stronger in their game against Bologna than Forest will in Porto. I think he said, hasn't he, Vitor Pereira, that he would love to go full pelt in the Europa League, but he can't afford to because of the Premier League. They've given themselves a little bit of breathing space with that win over Tottenham. But you just wonder now if Aston Villa, after a dreadful run, have turned a corner. Certainly, I'm more confident about their chances of finishing in the Champions League places on the back of winning that last Premier League game than I was previously.
West Ham against Wolves is live on Friday night on talkSPORT. Saturday morning, Arsenal against Bournemouth. Game Day Live takes you around the grounds from 2:30 on Saturday afternoon. Adrian Durham brings you all the goals as they go in from the Premier League, the AFL and beyond. Brentford Everton, Brighton away at Burnley and Middlesbrough, Portsmouth, big featured games this weekend. And Sunday, Crook and I will be on air from 1:30. Mickey Gray and Perry Groves will be with us as well. We've got the Premier League to bring you, loads of matches. Forest against Villa, Sunderland against Tottenham, Chelsea against Manchester City, EFL matches, and the Virtue Trophy final from Wembley as well. It's a full-packed weekend. Of course, we'll keep you in touch with the Masters, and Crook will come dressed as John Daly. That's it from us. We'll see you on Monday with a review of all the weekend's action. Make sure you tell all your friends and family about Premier League All Access from talkSPORT.